We used to build ships that the ocean could not touch. But then the bureaucrats stepped in. We are uncovering why the Environmental Protection Agency banned the best marine paints and what pros use instead. Decades ago, American chemical engineers forged bottom paints so powerful that a hull could sit in salt water for 10 years without a single barnacle. It was a masterpiece of industrial dominance, giving us an asymmetric engineering advantage against the crushing forces of nature. But the government decided this invincible armor was too effective. They outlawed the heavy metals. They stripped our fleets of their ultimate defense, forcing you to buy weak, eco-friendly coatings that fail in 6 months. What was the legendary chemical compound they erased from the shelves, and what is the unstoppable industrial alternative the commercial shipyards are quietly using to fight back today? Tributyltin was not just a chemical, it was the closest thing to invincibility we ever rolled onto steel. In the shipyards, we called it SPC, self-polishing copolymer. The genius wasn't just in the poison, but in the way it was locked into the paint's molecular backbone, waiting for the ocean to do its work. Every time seawater hit the hull, it triggered a controlled reaction, hydrolysis they called it. The outer layer would erode, molecule by molecule, releasing a fresh dose of biocide right at the surface. The paint never got rough, never got thin in patches. Instead, it polished itself smooth, always exposing new chemical armor. That is why we could send a freighter out for 5 years, sometimes more, without a single barnacle daring to stick. But the power of SPC wasn't just in the can, it demanded respect in the yard. We didn't slap it on over old paint and call it good. We blasted hulls to SA 2.5, bare metal, every inch shining. Then came the epoxy primer. No shortcuts, no pinholes. Only then did we lay down the TBT arsenal, building up to 100 microns, wet on wet, each coat measured with a gauge. If you missed a speck, you'd know it 3 years later when the first fouling showed up. But when you got it right, you could forget about scraping, forget about dry dock bills for half a decade. The chemical engineers handed us a weapon, and we wielded it with discipline. This wasn't consumer-grade wishful thinking. This was industrial warfare. The ocean is relentless. It will rot, corrode, and encrust anything you give it, unless you answer with science and steel. SPC-TBT was our answer. It didn't just slow fouling, it erased it. That's why we called it invincible. And that's why, to this day, nothing in the recreational aisles even comes close. The real tragedy is most boat owners have never seen what true chemical armor looks like. They've never watched a hull come out of the water after 5 years, still slick, still clean, still ready for another campaign. That was the legend. That was the standard. And the rest of the world spent decades trying to catch up. A ship in dry dock is nothing but steel, paint, and ledger lines until you see what real chemical armor does to the bottom line. Back when we wielded Tributyltin, the numbers told the story better than any salesman. A single application meant 5, sometimes 6 years between haulouts. That wasn't a marketing claim, it was stamped in the maintenance logs of every shipping company that mattered. The old copper paints barely scraped through 2 seasons before the barnacles started stacking up like bricks. But with TBT, the hulls came out of the water slick as oil, year after year. Fleet managers ran the math. Dry docking a freighter isn't just about paint, it's a week of lost revenue, a crew idling, a mountain of bills. With TBT, we slashed dry dock visits by 70%. That's not a typo. 70, the accountants noticed. Across the world's merchant fleets, adoption shot past 90% by the late 1980s. If you ran steel in salt water, you ran TBT. The cost savings were so dramatic, some yards started tracking fuel efficiency gains, 2, sometimes 3%, just from a cleaner hull. On a 1,000-mile run, that's real money. The ledgers from those years are a testament to what happens when you let engineers, not bureaucrats, call the shots. You could see it in the procurement orders, barrels of SPC rolling off the railcars, stacked 3 high on the dock. The insurance companies even started factoring TBT into their risk models because a clean hull meant fewer breakdowns and less corrosion. Everyone from the Navy to the smallest tug outfit wanted in. That was operational dominance, measurable, repeatable, undeniable. We weren't just fighting barnacles, we were waging economic warfare, and we were winning. That's what real anti-fouling armor gave us: years of service, mountains of savings, and the confidence to send a ship anywhere on the planet, knowing she'd come back ready for more. That's what they took away. The first cracks appeared not in the paint, but in the paperwork. In 1988, the EPA laid down its position document, and the language was clear as a ship's bell at midnight. Tributyltin was not just effective, it was too effective. That phrase burned through the industry like a weld arc. For decades, we had measured success by the number of barnacles left on a hull. Now, the very thing that made TBT legendary was being used as the case against it. The EPA's own toxicity figures read like a war report: less than 0.1 micrograms per liter, and you would start seeing imposex in marine snails, females growing male organs, whole populations thrown off balance. In the marinas, shellfish beds started collapsing. Oysters would not set. Mussels vanished from pilings where they had clung for generations. I remember the first time a NOAA ecologist walked the yard with a clipboard, reading out numbers that sounded almost imaginary. TBT, he said, was showing up everywhere: sediment cores, water samples, even in the soft tissue of scallops. The compound did not just kill barnacles, it lingered, binding itself to the mud and moving up the food chain. Some of us scoffed, but the data kept coming. In San Diego Bay, concentrations topped 600 nanograms per liter, enough to wipe out bivalve recruitment for years. The EPA's 2002 draft criteria called TBT very toxic to aquatic life and demanded water quality standards at the state level. By 2004, the final fact sheet did not mince words. The risks were unacceptable. Fleet managers got the first notices of violation in the late 1990s. The EPA's legal hammer came down on any manufacturer still selling tributyltin for non-military use, citing that too effective clause as the basis for enforcement. The dry dock masters and engineers who had spent decades perfecting the application process suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of the law. It did not matter that every dry dock ledger showed the savings, or that the Navy itself kept tributyltin in reserve for years after the first bans. The science had spoken, and the regulators were listening. From the outside, it looked like a clean break. Just swap out the paint and move on. But in the yards, we knew better. The old chemical arsenal was being stripped away, not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. The same biocidal punch that let us send ships around the world without a scrape was now condemned as an ecological overreach. And so the dominoes started to fall. First the EPA, then the European Community, and finally the International Maritime Organization. By the time the global ban took effect in 2008, the Legend of TBT was already being buried beneath a mountain of compliance paperwork and environmental monitoring reports. But the lesson was burned into every shipwright's mind: the ocean never forgives weakness, and neither does the market. When you take away real armor, you had better have something ready to fill the gap. The hammer didn't fall in just one yard or one country. Once the EPA fired the first shot, the rest of the world lined up to pull the trigger. It started with the European Community in 1989, when TBT was stripped from the arsenal by decree, not by failure. They called it an emergency measure to save the shellfish, and overnight, the old paints vanished from chandlers and shipyards across the continent. But the real tidal wave hit in 2001, when the International Maritime Organization gathered in London and put pen to paper on the AFS Convention. That document was more than policy, it was a global order. No vessel, no matter the flag, could carry organotin paint after 2008. Every flag state signed on. Japan, Australia, Canada, the EU, all locked arms and marched in step. The language was clinical, but the effect was absolute. The AFS convention didn't just ban new applications, it forced every ship owner on the planet to either strip their hulls bare or bury the old armor under certified barrier coats. By September 17, 2008, if you showed up in port with TBT leaching from your hull, you were out of compliance, detained, fined, blacklisted. The paperwork alone could drown a fleet. That's when the certificate regime took over. No more handshakes or old boy networks. Now, every vessel above 400 gross tons had to carry an International Anti-Fouling System certificate, signed, stamped, and ready for inspection at any port. Inspectors started showing up with ultrasonic meters and test kits, not just clipboards. If your hull didn't match the paperwork, you weren't going anywhere. The enforcement arm of the IMO was not shy about it either. Detention spiked, and the threat of a blacklist turned ship owners into compliance zealots. The European Union doubled down. Their biocidal products regulation outlawed TBT outright, then moved to cap copper and scrutinize every new anti-fouling compound that hit the market. National bans in Australia, Canada, and Japan followed the same playbook, each one citing the same phrase, too effective, environmentally unacceptable. The language echoed from Brussels to Sydney like a funeral bell for the old chemical order. For the dry dock masters, it meant a new world of scarcity. The supply chains that once delivered barrels of chemical armor now offered only watered-down alternatives, if you could even get them. Certified coatings, endless documentation, audits that could halt a job for a missing label. The days of picking the best tool for the job were over. Now, every brushstroke had to answer to a treaty. The ocean didn't get any kinder, but the rules got a lot tighter. Ask any old-timer who remembers the arsenal we lost. He'll tell you, we didn't surrender our best weapons in a fair fight. We handed them over, one regulation at a time, until the only thing left between steel and the sea was a stack of certificates and a prayer. The market for real armor dried up, replaced by eco-friendly promises and annual touch-ups. But the commercial fleets, the ones with the tonnage, the right paperwork, and the right connections, found ways to keep a semblance of the old strength. For everyone else, it was the beginning of the Great Retreat. The ocean doesn't care about treaties, it still wants to eat your hull. And now, you'd better hope your paperwork is as thick as your paint. Every spring, the Marina Ledger fills up like a casualty report. $300 a gallon for retail anti-fouling, sometimes more if you want a brand name or a hint of copper. But it is not just the paint. You start with a haul-out fee, then pay a crew to grind off last year's failure. Scraping, sanding, priming, hours lost to the crawl space under a 40-foot hull, breathing in dust and regret. And for what? 12 months, if you're lucky, before the first barnacle laughs at your eco-label. Less than a year, and you are right back where you started, booking another haul-out, shelling out another $1,000 for paint that promises the world and delivers a season. The numbers do not lie. A 3-year cycle on a mid-sized cruiser runs close to $9,000, paint, labor, lost weekends, and all. That is not a yacht club myth. That is the average from marina surveys up and down the coast. Owners show me their ledgers like confessionals, every line item a reminder that the real expense is not the paint itself. It is the relentless, grinding repetition. Annual haul-outs, annual scraping, annual disappointment. The ocean does not care about green marketing. It wants steel and it wants blood. And with every new regulation, every copper cap, it is the owners who pay, one invoice at a time, year after year, while the barnacles keep coming. Copper was supposed to be our fallback, our last line when the real chemical arsenals were stripped away. But the regulators did not stop at TBT. They came for copper next, wielding state statutes and water quality models like weapons, capping the content in retail paints at 30% or less. In places like Washington and California, the rules are written in decimals and micrograms. No more than 30% cuprous oxide in the can, no more than 1.5% leaching per year, or you are out of compliance. The result? The consumer formulas got neutered. What used to be a heavy metal punch is now a watered-down promise. Good for a season if you are lucky. The marina shelves are full of these eco-branded paints, 30% copper, a dash of booster biocide, and a warning label longer than your arm. They sell hope in a can, but the barnacles are not fooled. Meanwhile, the commercial fleets, the ones hauling freight, dragging nets, or pushing tugs upriver, still armor up with industrial-grade coatings north of 30% copper, sometimes pushing 50% if you know where to look. But for the average owner, the copper cap is a hard wall. You cannot buy the old strength at the chandlery, no matter how much you are willing to pay. The dry dock masters know the truth. These limits are not about innovation, they are about containment. The ocean has not changed, but the rules have, and every spring you see the consequences scraped off in piles. You want real protection? You need real armor, and that is something you will not find on the retail shelf. In the commercial yards, metal still holds its ground, if you know where to look. High copper epoxy, built for ships that measure their lives in crossings, not weekends, carries up to 40% cuprous oxide. That is the industrial threshold, far above anything found on the shelves for pleasure boats. The binder matters just as much. Epoxy resins cure into a tough, glassy skin, releasing copper at a controlled rate. The International Maritime Organization draws the line at 1.5% annual leach rate. These coatings meet that limit, never exceeding it, but still deliver enough punch to keep hulls clean for 3 to 4 years between dry dockings, even on vessels over 500 gross tons. This is not paint you pick up at the marina. Distributors handle it by the pallet, not the can, and every shipment comes with paperwork to match. Oversight is strict, but the reward is real. A hull that resists the ocean's slow attack, season after season. Blast to bare steel, prime with zinc, apply the coats with care, and you get a surface that endures. In the world of working ships, copper remains the answer if you follow the rules. Silicone. Foul release is not paint, it is physical engineering, pure and simple. The first time I saw a hull armored with polydimethylsiloxane, I thought the yard boys had gone soft. No copper, no biocide, just a slick, pale skin stretched tight over steel. But the science behind it is a different kind of weapon. Polydimethylsiloxane, called PDMS, is not about poisoning barnacles, it is about denying them a grip. The surface energy drops so low that nothing can cling for long. Mussels, algae, even the toughest barnacle try to stick, and the first mile at sea peels them off like tape from glass. The numbers are real. I have seen supply ships run 6 years on a single application, haul out with less than 5% fouling, and drop right back in. Fuel savings, 4.5% year after year. That is not marketing fluff, it is ledger lines, audited by accountants who do not care about green promises, only about burn rates and bottom lines. But do not mistake it for a shortcut. Silicone armor demands perfection. The hull gets sanded smoother than a billiard ball, every scratch filled, every weld bead feathered. Miss a detail, and you will pay for it in lost speed and wasted fuel. Get it right though, and you are looking at the longest legal protection in the game. Sometimes 7 years without a haul out, without a barnacle, without a care. That is not compromise, that is supremacy. In the industrial arsenal, silicone is the final word. We do not accept fragile coatings. We armor our hulls with the most powerful compounds the law allows. The ocean never relents. Every new copper limit, every retail downgrade, just sharpens the divide between those scraping barnacles and those who still wield real chemical armor. Today, the commercial loophole survives, and so does the Legend of TBT, proof that uncompromising engineering once kept the sea at bay. We do not accept fragile compromises. We armor our hulls with the most powerful compounds the law allows. Drop your thoughts below, shipmates.